Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we are completely reframing how you think about your own biology. We're not just talking about a simple digestive tube here, we are exploring an incredibly complex, interconnected biological command center. Your gut microbiome is literally the foundational network that governs your metabolism, your energy regulation, your immune response, and yes, even your cognitive performance. Whether you're trying to optimize a GLP-1 companion lifestyle to manage your appetite, or you're looking to regulate cortisol and circadian rhythms for better sleep and recovery, guess what? It all traces back to the ecological architecture of your gut. We're going to construct an ever-expanding map of knowledge in this explainer, treating the human body as exactly what it is, a single, highly organized supercomputer. To map out today's elite-level biological symposium, we are going to explore 6 interconnected domains. First, the systemic command center. Second, short-chain fatty acids. Third, the gut organ axes. Then we'll look at fiber versus fermented foods. Fifth is polyphenols and prebiotics. And finally, we'll wrap up with clinical titration. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the Systemic Command Center, where we'll be defining our ecological architecture. So our gut is this highly specialized microenvironment, and it requires intense ecological stability and metabolic resilience just to function day to day. If we actually map out the spatial architecture of this microbiome, we see some really distinct populations. Look at this distribution. Firmicutes, which includes genera like Lactobacillus and Clostridium, make up a massive 64% majority. Then you've got Bacteroidetes coming in at 30%. Now, from an evolutionary biology perspective, this specific setup creates what we call functional redundancy. It's basically an insurance policy. It means that if one strain gets wiped out by stress or a round of antibiotics, another one can step right in to maintain the metabolic machinery without the entire system crashing down. Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens when that functional redundancy collapses. That's when we enter a state called dysbiosis. It's essentially a systems-level failure. Losing that favorable microbial balance is actually the root cause for a whole host of chronic, body-wide pathologies. We're talking everything from inflammatory bowel disease to obesity to metabolic dysfunction-associated steatic liver disease, or MASLD for short. When your gut's ecological architecture fails, the entire biological network falters with it, and that triggers a cascade of systemic inflammation and insulin resistance. So you might be wondering, why is this happening at such an unprecedented rate in our modern society? Well, that brings us to something called the old friends hypothesis. See, our industrialized, heavily sanitized, completely sterile diets have entirely removed the evolutionary inputs that our bodies are hardwired to expect. We intrinsically need these non-harmful microbes. They're literally the critical stimulus that trains our immune system not to overreact to every little thing. Without them, we lose our normal immune tolerance, and that sets off these chronic inflammatory networks that just chip away at our overall health span. But we never want to just stop at a surface-level explanation, right? We have to dig into the constraints and the trade-offs in biology. So ask yourself, does high microbial diversity universally guarantee optimal health? Because the common narrative out there constantly tells us that more diversity is always 100% better. But the science is far more nuanced, and we really have to account for individual variability and actual physiological constraints. As it turns out, more isn't universally better. It's wild, but in certain populations, having highly elevated gut microbial diversity can actually extend your colonic transit times. And when that transit time gets prolonged, the microbes basically run out of carbohydrates to ferment, so they switch gears and start degrading proteins instead. This shift in their metabolism leads to the systemic circulation of really harmful, toxic protein degradation products, like uremic toxins. It's a perfect example of how there are always hidden biological costs and complex feedback loops that we absolutely have to account for in clinical medicine. Let's move on to Section 2, short-chain fatty acids, otherwise known as your body's molecular messengers. Transitioning from the big macro ecosystem down to the microscopic level, we've got to look at short-chain fatty acids. These are the absolutely crucial biochemical signals produced when your microbes ferment dietary fibers. Let's construct a causal chain here to see exactly how these 3 specific metabolites bypass the gut entirely to alter our whole physiology. First up, butyrate. It stays local. It acts as the primary fuel for your colonocytes, heavily reinforcing the epithelial barrier and tight junctions to prevent any endotoxins from leaking out. Next is propionate. This one travels straight through the portal vein to the liver, where it actually inhibits cholesterol synthesis via gluconeogenesis. And finally, acetate. It enters your systemic circulation, reaching the brain and peripheral tissues to regulate postprandial glucose. And this is absolutely crucial for anyone exploring a GLP-1 companion lifestyle, because acetate directly stimulates the release of your body's own endogenous satiety hormones to regulate your appetite. Which brings us nicely to Section 3, the gut organ axes. We are looking at massive biodirectional biological networks here. Let's see how these messengers build into a fully integrated biological supersystem. Your gut's enteric nervous system is bidirectionally linked straight up to your central nervous system. Your microbes are actually in there synthesizing neurotransmitters and hunger hormones like ghrelin, which directly dictate your sleep architecture, your circadian rhythm, and even your mood. We've also got a direct highway to the liver via the portal vein, where bile acids from the gut activate FXR receptors to control your body's energy and lipid metabolism. On the flip side, if your gut barrier is compromised, endotoxins like lipopolysaccharides or LPS can cross over and trigger massive, body-wide immune cascades, neural inflammation, and completely disrupt your sleep and recovery. Okay, let's dive into Section 4, Fiber versus Fermented Foods, highlighting a truly landmark trial out of Stanford. Taking a clinical grand rounds perspective for a moment, we have to look at this incredible 10-week, 36-adult trial from the Stanford School of Medicine. The divergence in outcomes between the high-fiber and fermented food interventions is honestly staggering. The fermented food cohort, who were eating things like yogurt, kefir, and kimchi, exhibited a massive progressive increase in their overall microbial diversity. It caused a systemic, lasting remodeling of their resident microbial ecology. But the high-fiber cohort, eating beans, grains, and nuts, surprisingly, they showed no significant changes in microbial diversity. Turns out, without a healthy foundational microbiome already in place, much of that fiber was simply excreted entirely intact. So the crucial point here is that just adding fiber alone doesn't instantly repair a depleted ecosystem. And the Stanford researchers uncovered something else profound for the fermented food cohorts. 19. That's the exact number of inflammatory proteins that were dramatically and uniformly reduced across the entire fermented food group. We are literally talking about a systemic, body-wide reduction in inflammation, which lowers the baseline of chronic stress on your immune system just from integrating these living foods into their daily nutrition. Moving right along to Section 5, polyphenols and prebiotic modulators. This is where we get into engineering microbial growth. Once those foundational microbes are well established, we can actually strategically feed them. Your dietary choices are essentially metabolic programming. Just look at the specific biochemical pathways here. Red wine polyphenols directly increase beneficial bifidobacteria while actively driving down pathogenic E. coli. Oat beta-glucans get fermented by the gut into propiate, which leverages that FXR signaling we talked about to lower liver cholesterol. Berries and nuts supply these complex compounds like L-argitannins for elite antioxidant defense, and T flavonoids directly alter how your microbiota metabolizes energy. You are quite literally coding your internal biological software, maximizing your health span with every single bite. Finally, we reach Section 6, clinical titration. Let's walk through a stepwise implementation protocol. You can't just flip a switch and overwhelm your system without causing some pretty massive gastrointestinal distress. Careful biological adaptation is what prevents the systemic shock of severe bloating or immune flares. So we implement a very precise 5-step protocol. Step 1, low-dose initialization. You want to start with just 1 to 2 teaspoons of fermented food daily for a week, just to allow that enteric nervous system to adapt. Step 2 is stepwise escalation, where you gradually work your way up to a 3-serving maintenance dose. Step 3 is vital, hydration coupling. You absolutely must dramatically increase your water intake to support this structural intestinal shift. For anyone experiencing functional complaints, Step 4 uses targeted premeal enzymes to reduce undigested starch sitting in the colon. And finally, Step 5. For folks with histamine intolerance from fermented foods, supplementing exogenous DAO enzymes can prevent those systemic histamine flares and the sleep disruption that comes with them. By mapping out all these mechanisms, the feedback loops, and the physiological trade-offs, we realize that everything, from our longevity down to our daily cognitive performance, is tethered to this one ecosystem, which leaves us with a pretty profound question to walk away with today. When we eat, when we sleep, and when we move, are we merely maintaining a basic digestive organ, or are we continuously programming an interconnected biological supercomputer? The science heavily points to the latter. And the crazy part is, we have only just scratched the surface of this expanding map of knowledge. Until next time, keep exploring.